he kept her there. He did not lay a hand on her. That was how he would tell it to himself later, in the long accounting of the nights that followed. He never touched her, never raised his voice, never said the word stop. He simply did not let her go. Which is a different and quieter and far more cowardly thing than holding someone. As she gathered the child to run, he stepped, as if by accident, between her and the dark mouth of the coast path. And he said, in the slow, reasonable voice of an old man who only wanted to understand, "Now wait. Wait. Which way are you even going? There's marsh that way. You'll drown the pair of you in the dark. And what's the Margrave want with you anyway? What have you done?" And she stopped, because a fleeing person grasped any thread that might still be a way out, and answered him. A sentence. 2 precious seconds bleeding out of her while the torches swelled in the lane. And Bevan stood in her path with his patient, reasonable questions and spent her last half-minute for her, deliberately, while telling himself with every word that he was only an old man making conversation. Not a gate, not a snare, not the thing that the next 20 years would know him to have been. She understood a half-second before the riders did. He saw it land in her face, saw her see that the slow questions were not confusion, but a hand on her ankle. That the old ferryman had decided, and that the deciding had already cost her the path. And the look she gave him in that half-second was not the lamp going out look from before. It was worse. It was recognition. She knew exactly what he was, because she had clearly met his kind on the long road behind her. The ones who do you in gently, who never strike a blow, who simply stand in the doorway being reasonable until the men with the swords arrive. And her knowing it, and his knowing that she knew, passed between them in the lamplight in the last instant before the horses came onto the jetty, and it was done. They took her. It was quick, and loud, and ugly, and Bevan did not watch the worst of it. He had become, the moment he stepped into her path, a man who does not watch. The sergeant clapped him on the shoulder, and called him a good, loyal old fellow, and said the Margrave rewarded those who helped his men. And Bevan stood and took the hand on his shoulder, and the word loyal like blows he had asked for. And they bound the woman's hands, and put her and the silent bundle up across a saddle, and turned the horses, and rode away up the lane into the fog with her, and the hoofbeats faded, and the jetty was quiet, and the lamp burned, and the fog rolled in off the water the way it always did, patient, waiting, beginning already to gather into the shapes it would keep. He stood there a long time. He was entirely safe. That was the deal he had made, and the deal had paid out in full. His boat, his license, his quiet, his life, all of it secured, at the cost of one stranger and her child, who he would never have to think about again if he chose not to. And he found, standing in the cold, that the choice of whether to think about them again was the last fork the night had left him, and that it was somehow larger than all the others. He could take the reward and keep it. He could go in, and sleep, and rise tomorrow, and ferry the strait, and be the good loyal old fellow the sergeant had named him, and let the thing he had done sink down into the deep water of a life with many years left in it, and never trouble the surface again. Men did it. Most men did it. The world ran on the quiet of men who had stood in a doorway once, and let the bad thing happen, and gone home and lived. He could be one more of them, and keep his peace, and let the woman and her child become a thing that had happened, briefly, on a foggy night, to someone he need not have been. Or he could refuse the reward, even now, even after. He could not unsay what he had done. She was bound on a saddle riding into the dark, and nothing would unsay it. But he could decide that betraying her was not going to be the last act he committed in the matter. Could take his boat and his 40 years and go. Not after the riders who were gone, but after the thing under the betrayal, the Margrave and his marshal, and the whole apparatus that had now used Bevan twice, once to take his daughter, and once to make him a willing gate. could turn what was left of his life into a reckoning, find where they were taking her, warn whom he could warn, ruin what he could ruin, and pay for the gate he had made himself into with whatever the paying cost. Because a man who has done the worst thing he is capable of has at least nothing careful left to protect.